temperantia,
courage,
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Today, my guest is Nick Holderbaum, a firefighter and paramedic, as well as a founder of Primalosophy, a health coaching business and podcast. Welcome to the Sunday Stoic, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Steve. I was really looking forward to talking with you today.
So, why don't you introduce yourself to the listening audience?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Nick Holderbaum. I'm the host of the Primalosophy podcast. I'm also a full-time firefighter paramedic, and I like to consider myself a sort of street-level philosopher, just a practicing student of Stoic philosophy.
Now, let's start at the beginning. What got you into your current profession? How did you choose firefighting as a profession?
I was kind of tired of working the blue-collar jobs. Wanted to do something more exciting, more rewarding, something more fulfilling. And I knew that going to fire school and to paramedic school was going to be shorter, cheaper, and also a career that I could find myself doing for, something long term.
And has it been a fulfilling career?
Absolutely. It's a great career. It's one of the best jobs there is, but it's also one of the most unhealthy jobs there is. So with that being said, it is important and helpful to find a sort of guiding philosophy like Stoicism that provides you with these practical takeaways that you can use on and off the job to help manage some of the stress.
I could imagine there's quite a few stresses possibly involved. One, obviously smoke inhalation. That can't be healthy. But also, I'm sure from time to time you're just exposed to extreme situations, stressful situations, and you may end up seeing people in pain and etc. that could scar you, for lack of a better term. I could imagine. So how did you then first discover the philosophy of Stoicism?
I first discovered it. I think Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was just recommended to me. And for most people, I think that book resonated with me the most out of, the big three. And I read it once a year, sometimes a couple times a year. But after that, I moved on to reading more about Epictetus and then got letters from a Stoic. I read some Musonius Rufus, and with the I guess you would call it the resurgence in Stoicism. Read some of Ryan Holiday's books and just, I'm interested in it. I follow most people who write about Stoicism these days.
So do you have then any of the practices, the Stoic practices that you apply on a regular basis?
On a regular basis, on duty, especially for me, the dichotomy of control is something that's always in my pocket. I mean, you have to be able to cultivate indifference to things outside of your control. Most things in the fire service are going to be outside of your control. So it helps to remain indifferent and to not get worked up by things that can't change. So that's one way that you deal with the stressors of the job. That's one way you deal with the sleep deprivation, getting up multiple times throughout the night. I cherish my sleep, but it's one thing that you don't get on duty. And recognizing that that's something that you can't change. You signed up for the job. So while you're there, you're going to be taking runs and you're going to be sleep deprived. But how you respond to that is always going to be in your control.
I could imagine that trying to just driving a fire truck in the middle of the night when you're sleep deprived alone is a task. But I would, there has to be a lot of decision making and things of that nature involved when you arrive at a scene, is there not?
Oh yeah, there's a lot, and a lot of people, when you wake up in the middle of the night, it's you're pretty groggy. It's not the time to get behind a big fire truck when you're drowsy driving. But luckily, when those loud tones go off, it does have enough of that fight or flight response activation to get you aware enough that you can drive down the road somewhat safely and then make some decisions.
So do you do any Stoic practices when you're not on duty in order to prepare yourself for being on duty?
Yeah, I think negative visualization or a pre-mortem is key. A lot of people, for me, it's imagining worst case scenario is helpful because most of the time on duty, you're responding to emergencies. So when you imagine what could go wrong and better prepare yourself for those situations, also, you're going to see some pretty emotionally disturbing things. You're going to see a lot of death. You're going to see a lot of tragedy and heartbreak. So preparing for that and realizing that you're going to have to be emotionally detached, not necessarily 100%, but also just enough so that you can keep your professionalism.
Sure. Now, I'm just trying to, wrap my head around that kind of career. I'm not going to, we're not going to offer official medical advice here, but obviously beyond, other than going to see a professional counselor or something, you witness things like you said, death and destruction and pain and trying to, are there any practices that help you to not take that home with you as much as you might if you didn't have Stoicism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the great things about having some sort of guiding philosophy is your ability to use reason. So this is a job. And what would it look like if I were to respond on a scene where there's an emergency and someone's hurt or someone's crying, and then as the professional that's supposed to be there to be able to take care of them, you weep along with them.
Right.
What good would that do? And, to be honest, after working for a busy fire department for, 5 or 6 years, it's only natural that you do develop a sort of, I don't want to say jadedness, but a detachment from emotions. And you're able to put emotions aside because you are there to do a job.
Could you mentioned the premeditatio, and then you mentioned that term I've read before, the pre-mortem?
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain the way you would do that before taking a shift?
Yeah, absolutely. And another great thing about the pre-mortem or the negative visualization is that is a great tool to overcome occupational burnout or the jadedness of the job. And that goes for all healthcare, professionals, because just imagine what it would be like to lose your job, or imagine what it would be like to lose someone that you love or something that you have. It's a great way to overcome the hedonic treadmill as well.
Mm-hmm.
We all strive for these great jobs, and then once we have them a few years down the road, we no longer have the same passion, or we no longer appreciate what we have. So imagine losing that job. Imagine being back to where you were 10 years ago and everything that you worked for going out the window. So that's a great way to reclaim that initial love that you had for your profession or for your loved ones and friends and belongings.
Mm-hmm. I know one way I think about it sometimes is, let's say I have a big project I have to do or whatever, and think, okay, in my mind, I finished it. Now what all went wrong? And then, what's likely to have gone wrong? What have I overlooked? And try, we can't use reason to find things that we are incapable of finding, but we can find where we've been a little lax or lazy, or where we skipped over some of our planning process, and we haven't done the work ahead of time that we should have done to help better ensure success. And that's best caught beforehand rather than regretting it after the fact, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was Seneca who said that the pre-mortem it helps remove the sting when adversity does arrive.
Exactly. So you may be able to avoid some of the sting by catching some areas where you might improve yourself, but also when failure does occur, something does go left when you thought it'd go right, you can better deal with the situation and not be hurt by it.
Yeah, and same thing goes for insults from others. Wherever, it's one thing to be prepared for. You're going to meet assholes in this world, and you're going to be insulted. So in between that space of external stimuli and response, that's where your reason comes in.
So, tell us a bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is somewhat new. I basically reach out and interview people that I find interesting and that have cool life stories. So it varies. You know, one week I'll have someone on who is in the ancestral health scene, you know, who maybe is a functional medicine practitioner, and then the next week it could be just, you know, someone who's interested in Stoic philosophy, or, you know, an author of a book that I liked. Really, I just reach out to anyone that I think it would be great to have a conversation with.
Well,
And I want to keep it that way. I want to have open conversation, because, you know, people find your podcast interesting when they're interested in the same guests.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, as podcast hosts, we're just conduits.
Right. And I've seen that you have had a varied number of guests. There was one gentleman who was on the Warren Commission. Is that correct?
Yeah, Cyril Wecht. Yep.
Yeah, tell us about Cyril.
Yeah, so he's a forensic pathologist. If you haven't seen the documentary One Nation Under Stress, I recommend you check it out. He's a fascinating guy. He was responsible for the John F. Kennedy trial, the O.J. Simpson, Elvis Presley, and Nicole Smith. He's done some insane amount of autopsies, and I just wanted to kind of pick his brain and to see what his relationship, how it's changed over the years of seeing so much, I guess, just death and mortality. And he's just a really interesting guy. He imparted a lot of wisdom on that podcast. And yeah, I recommend everyone check that out.
Yeah, and you also interview some firefighters, it looks like, from members of your own profession, but a lot of scientists and medical doctors, it seems, and a wide variety of individuals. Everyone has some wisdom to give the world, and it's and I've listened to a couple of your episodes now, and they've been very interesting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think we're all trying to achieve peace of mind and peace of body, and through a combination of ancestral health and ancient wisdom, I think we can achieve that.
So, tell us then about your you have a health coaching business. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So I'm trained in ancestral health. If you don't know what that means, it basically is saying, you know, eat like your ancestors ate, move like your ancestors moved, get plenty of sunshine, social connectedness. Our genes expect the same thing that they did 10,000 years ago. And as long as we send our bodies the right signals, then they'll express themselves in a healthy way, and we can be free of chronic disease. So I'll mainly work with first responders right now. I'm trying to prevent and reverse chronic disease in the fire service.
Okay. Now, what about do you have any items you've gleaned from the folks you've interviewed on the podcast, or things from your, you know, general ideas from your health coaching? So, your interviewees, for example, you've talked about diet, as even sleep, right? Like the benefits of sleep. What can a few things an average person can do to, you know, that may not be Stoic related, that would help them to lead a healthier, perhaps happier lifestyle?
Yeah, sleep is everything. If you have poor sleep, you're going to have poor health. So in order to have proper sleep hygiene, let's just go over like a typical daily routine and nightly routine that can ensure that you'll have proper sleep. So first things first, in the morning, hopefully you're not waking up to an alarm clock. I think a leisurely morning is the key to happiness. You need to immediately expose yourself to sunlight. That's going to set your circadian clock. Give yourself an hour or two upon waking, before eating. That gives your body time to wake up, your pancreas time to wake up. You know, you have your breakfast or lunch, and then like I said, expose yourself to plenty of sunlight throughout the day. And when it comes to nighttime, our ancestors went to bed a couple hours after sundown. You're going to want to avoid artificial light. So digital stimulation, all the blue light is bad for you. It's going to suppress your melatonin, which is your sleep hormone. So avoid artificial light on screens and TVs. You can wear blue light blocking glasses. Use candlelight in your house instead of having all the lights on. Don't eat too close to bed. Obviously, alcohol is going to disrupt your sleep. Substance abuse is huge in the fire service. We're all sleep deprived, and people think that alcohol is going to help them get to bed, and it will help you fall asleep, but it causes fragmented sleep, so you're not going to reach that deep sleep. And then, yeah, just the basics: sleep in a cool, dark environment, and quiet. Have some white noise. That's what helps me. And yeah, just guard your sleep, because as long as you're getting 8 hours of sleep, it's going to benefit you tremendously in the long run. Less than 5 or 6 hours of sleep at night is linked to a host of chronic disease. I recommend everyone go out and read Dr. Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, if you want a real professional to go into more detail on it.
Oh, well, I'll give that a look. I know sleep is something that I've always had a hard time falling asleep, and then I tend to wake up a lot, and then it got worse once I had an infant in the house, obviously. But now his sleep is improving now. Now he's like 3, so it's getting a lot better. He usually doesn't wake up in the night, but sleep's always been one of those challenges for me. I don't know. Even as a kid, I'd lay in bed and stare at the ceiling. I wish I could fall asleep sometimes now.
Yeah, for those who are struggling to fall asleep or struggle with insomnia or shift work sleep disorder, go find a cognitive behavioral therapist who's trained in insomnia. To bring this full circle, we know how much influence Stoicism had on CBT, and it's proved to be extremely effective.
Excellent. Yeah, my wife can just sit down and boom, fall asleep. I'm sometimes jealous of that. Yeah. What about meditation? Is that something you've brought into your practices?
I am not one who sits down and tries to be alone with my thoughts in that form of meditation, but I do find walking in nature and also reading to be the most nourishing form of meditation for me. When I'm reading a physical book and my mind begins to wander, I come back to the page. And that's all it is. It's just a reminder to try to come back and be present again. Same thing with breath work.
So obviously staying healthy and then keeping a good mental attitude will help you go far, and no matter what your career path. Do you have any other advice for living well for our listeners?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have to find their own, source of happiness. But I think for most people, social connectedness is huge. So find people that, support you, who understand themselves. Obviously, spend lots of time with family. No one regrets spending too much time with family, right? You never hear anyone on their deathbed saying that they spent too much time with family. Find something that you love to do. Find the people who need you the most and make that your career. Be mindful. Obviously, that means living moment to moment, in my opinion. So stop future planning, stop regretting the past, and just be here now. Read tons of books, read tons of Stoic books. This ancient wisdom holds up for a reason, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say things don't, just because something's old doesn't mean it's right. But if it comes up again and again and again and is used by lots of different people to seemingly great effect, there's probably some usefulness in it.
Yeah, and find yourself a guiding philosophy. It doesn't have to be one philosophy. Obviously we're talking today, we both love Stoic philosophy, but that doesn't mean you can't draw from other schools. If you can take something away from Epicureanism or so on, that's great. These are all just tools that you can use to live a more ethical, meaningful life.
So where can folks go to find out more about your work and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media at Primalosophy. That's Primalosophy. I host the Primalosophy podcast. You can check it out on all podcast platforms. Go to www.primalosophy.com. And if you're interested in my health coaching, I also have a blog on there if you want to read some of my articles.
Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go, Nick?
Just love yourself first. You got to love yourself first in order to spread love outwardly and kindness.
All right. Well, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Steve.
All right.
See you, buddy.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.